Some NFL fans live for this week more than they live for the Super Bowl or any regular season or playoff week. It's draft week. And guess what? IAC. It all counts. It's all brought to you by Ticketmaster. Awesome concerts coming up in the late spring and into the summer. GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium has become the concert mecca, seemingly, of the Chiefs Kingdom area. So Ticketmaster will get you set up for those concerts and getting ready for the 2024 season.
McKinnon is in at running back. First down and goal to go. Play action fake. Right side throw. Touchdown! Kansas City! McCole Hardman with the catch on the right side. A 3-yard touchdown pass in overtime.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mitch Holthus, voice of the Chiefs, along with senior team reporter Matt McMullen. Okay, we kind of nerd out on it, but not as much as some of the draft nerds. But we have learned this, being around the Kansas City Chiefs for 11 seasons with Andy Reid and with Brett Veach since he took over, full control in 2018, that these 3 days coming up in the NFL draft, it all matters. There's the cliche, there's no such thing as a small thing. We've learned that in every part of the Chiefs Kingdom with Andy Reid. We talk about OTAs, we talk about camp, we talk about position groups and position coaches. Just every little thing matters. It all matters this weekend.
It really does. And the first round gets a lot of the hype and excitement, and understandably so. It's exciting. But one of the main reasons the Chiefs have been so good and the best team in the NFL over the last 5 years, besides the fact that we have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones, that obviously helps. But you have to supplement those players with talent around them. And Brett Veach and the front office have been incredible at that, particularly finding guys later in the draft. Listen to some of these players and then where they were drafted. So Chamari Connor, of course, made some big plays in the playoffs last year. 4th round. Joshua Williams had an interception in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago. Played some good corner for this team. 4th round. Jalen Watson, 7th round. Isaiah Pacheco, 7th round. Trey Smith, 6th round. Still can't believe that. Noah Gray, 5th round. Mike Dana, 5th round. And Nick Allegretti, 7th round. Think about that. Starting in the Super Bowl at guard as a 7th round pick back in 2019. So every single year, repeatedly, Brett Veach, Coach Reid, and this front office have found contributors later in the draft. So while the first round is a lot of fun, we're going to talk about potential first-round picks here during the podcast, but don't turn the draft off after Thursday. Keep watching Friday through Saturday because consistently the Chiefs have found champions in the later rounds.
And your key is through Saturday. It's throwing some others here. You go to the and to build a roster, and we've talked about this before, and the whole league talks about it, in Patrick Mahomes' second contract, where his contract with the salary cap as it is going to eat up, about 25% of the cap, you must draft well. It's got to the way it works, and it's why teams have not been successful many times on the Uber quarterback's second contract. So it's filling in the gaps too. If you look at the 3rd round, Leo Chenal, who might have had the most underrated effort in productivity during the run to Super Bowl 58, Derek Nottie, re-signed, a plotter inside. He's also in the 3rd round, along with the guys that you mentioned. And so it all counts in not only that, but undrafted free agency. We saw what happened last year with a Cam Jones out of Indiana, or last 2 years with Jack Cochran. That's when the bell rings after the draft ends on Saturday. So it behooves everybody in the Chiefs Kingdom to pay attention through all of this process.
And it's fun. We're back-to-back Super Bowl champions, and this is an opportunity to get even better. That's the way I look at this weekend, is the Chiefs are already back-to-back champions, and they will be better next week. And we're going to infuse this roster with some young talent, some exciting talent, and add to some positions that maybe we need to add to, and add some depth overall throughout this team. So I love the draft. Draft season has always been fun. I don't really think about it until the season ends. I know some people are doing draft 24/7. I admire you for that. I don't think about it until the Super Bowl is over. But, again, it's fun to pore over these players, learn about these players, figure out who might be a fit, and then see how the draft board falls this weekend.
Yeah, when you start having, mock UDFA picks, then it gets a little extreme, right? Let's look at the mock draft of the 7th round. But people have fun with it.
The all too early mock draft that will come out on May 1st. Yeah. It's this is worthless. It's totally
what are we doing
worthless.
here? What are we doing? Except some will just inhale it. But the Chiefs have picks in every round but the 6th round. currently standing this way. There will be 2 in the 5th round. So, again, as we just laid out, every round the Chiefs are there to pick and could pick your next star or next starter. Again, sans the 6th round, but who knows? We'll get to that in a second. But before we get into Brett Veach's comments that he made and thinking about where BV and his staff is going into this draft, let's go around the world. We cannot go around, get ready for the draft where it all counts, because we know every time we go around the world, that counts.
It sure does. Now we have 2 5th-round picks, right? So I have 5 around the worlds for you.
Perfect.
We've got a listener from Duncan, Oklahoma. Ever been there?
I have not, but okay. Keep going, because there's a Duncan, Oklahoma story.
Okay. Of course there is. Heard from Alu from Tampere, Finland. Probably mispronouncing that, but Tampere, Finland. Shout out to you. We heard from Johan in Stockholm, Sweden. Heading Scandinavia today.
We are so big on Scandinavia. We're going to have to figure out a way. We get a road trip and do a DTK.
I'd love to go to Scandinavia.
I would too.
That'd be great. I think we should go.
My wife's Swede, so she wants to go to Sweden.
Perfect. We'll do a on-location show.
Yep.
We heard from Richie from Jamesport, Missouri. Ever been to Jamesport?
I've not been to Jamesport. I know of it, but I've not been to Jamesport.
Okay. We'll have to get there too.
Yeah.
Then lastly, Jordan from Lake Worth, Florida. Shout out to you, Jordan.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Fantastic. Duncan, Oklahoma. My wife's first cousin, and this is a sad story. Wichita State had a plane crash. We've talked about that. And there was a young man in there from Duncan, Oklahoma that was on that team that perished in that crash along with my wife's first cousin. But Duncan, Oklahoma, there has been, in the years since, has paid tribute to that young man and his family, still represented there. So when Duncan, Oklahoma comes up, that flashes up there.
Yeah.
But anyway, great community there in the Sooner State, and we are gaining more fans there all the time. And a big shout out and thanks to Creed Humphrey. Speaking of Sooner State, from Shawnee, Oklahoma, he was part of our Home on the Range celebration in Smith Center. It was epic. So was Trey Smith, 3-time veteran. Echo Boydo was there for a while. So was Felix and Yudika Azama. But Creed Humphrey is just so is Trey and all those guys. But those two in particular, our center and right guard, are amazing human beings. And to see them relate to our entire kingdom, and you take them to rural America, and of course it resonates with both those guys. And the kids and the way they respond to them was magnificent.
And it gets back to the draft because we found both of those guys beyond round 1, right? You think about the 2021 draft. There was a mandate in the kingdom about kind of rebuilding the offensive line after Super Bowl 55. And how do you do that? Well, you find great players in the draft, and the Chiefs did that, finding Creed Humphrey in the 2nd round, then Trey Smith in the 6th round. I mean, it's just a testament to Brett Veach and his staff that they can find these guys, they can develop them, and turn them into Pro Bowl players. And, of course, as you laid out, also awesome guys off the field.
You mentioned the all-too-soon mock draft that'll come out May 1 for 2025. There's also the redraft.
Yeah, I like the redrafts.
Yeah, that comes out like 3 years after the draft. And it was great to see Trey Smith, who was redrafted in the 1st round after the Chiefs took him in the 6th round. In many ways, people think of Trey Smith. If you look in the last 4 years of the draft, he is the best value of any pick in the NFL draft during that span. I've seen that opinion given.
Wow. We probably had 3 guys in the 1st round in that redraft, right? With Bolton, Creed, and Trey. Yeah. And we didn't have a 1st-round pick that year and got 3 1st-round picks. Not bad.
Which speaks to this personnel staff and general manager Brett Veach, because that has Brett Veach all over it. And Brett had a media session a week ago, but I thought he was very candid. You know, he's so thorough. He's so purposed. He never stops. He's much like Pat. We were showing the video of Pat at the end of Super Bowl 58 hugging Chris Jones and going, "You're not going anywhere." You've seen this.
Oh, yeah.
You're not going anywhere. We're going for 3 in a row. And that's Brett Veach. Like the morning after the city celebration this year and the year before, they're in there grinding at like 7. I showed it last year at the kickoff luncheon. I go, how'd you guys spend the day after the celebration? Here's what Brett Veach and his staff did, and they're in there grinding away, upstairs in the personnel area. But Brett Veach is he's on task and on purpose, and so is his group. That's a couple of podcasts ago on Defending the Kingdom. But I thought he was very candid in what he said about the 2024 draft. It didn't seem like he was trying to play any games and just kind of let it fly.
Yeah, and to your point, those guys, Brett is the leader of that group, but all the scouts and front office people, they are committed to the grind, to say the least. And like you said, on our last podcast, we talked to a lot of our scouts and front office folks, including Ryan Nutt, and he talked about how they celebrated the Super Bowl. They got back to Kansas City, and the very next day they were grinding offensive line tape. So those guys are committed nonstop to never really stopping and smelling the roses. They're always looking forward, finding a way to make this team even better. And part of that is the draft, obviously, evaluating who is going to be the next group of Chiefs and what position groups are represent the biggest strengths in this year's draft. And Brett, as you said, is very candid about that kind of thing. He talked through the areas and the position groups he thought this draft was particularly strong in the context originally of being asked about the wide receiver class this year. Take a listen.
I think it's one of the deeper classes. I think the good thing about the wide receiver position, this is typically every year, is they provide depth really 1 through 5, and there's always pockets of players. I think there's a large group of receivers in the first 50 picks. I think that we have great grades on, and then I think there's another pocket right behind that. I think that is a positive. I think corner, there's some depth, middle to later on in the draft. O-lineman, as I mentioned in the opener, it's really good early. And so there'll be a late run on those guys, but it tails off a little bit. I think it's a better defensive line class than we've seen in the past. I think there's some good mid-round depth there. Linebacker, running back's probably a little lighter than years past. So I think O-line, receivers, corners are good hot spots throughout the draft, and that's a good thing because we can use one of each of those.
Brett's just the best because a lot of general managers, you'll ask them that question and they'll give you just a whole bunch of nothing. Brett will just tell you, wide receiver's good, offensive line is good early, corner, D-line pretty good, running back, linebacker, not so much. It's like, all right, that was my question and you answered it.
And speaking of opinion, many think, this just came out in the last 24 hours, some think it's the best wide receiver class ever for the 2024 draft class. I think there's some dynamics that come into play now, and we've seen football kind of evolve over the last several years in this regard. Your best athlete in high school normally is the quarterback. That quarterback many times will either transfer or that translates to, if they play college football, to being a wide receiver. They don't always stay at quarterback. There's only one quarterback. But now in these offenses, there's 4 wide and 5 wide, so there's more room at receiver. So the best athletes many times will then go to receiver. Sometimes the wide receivers will go to defensive back. We've talked about that before. But all of a sudden now, with not only the offenses that teams are playing, but 2, kind of the matriculation of how this works, we're seeing a glut of wide receivers, particularly this year. Now, we know the guys at the top of the board won't be there at 32, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., Roma Duze going right down the line, Neighbors. Those guys won't be there. But you and I have both looked at this. At 32, if you stay there and don't move up or down, a definition of a 32nd pick would be a day 1 starter. That means you hit it. That person has been able to morph into your system, and if there is it feels like to me that there are day 1 starters at wide receiver that will be available at 32.
Pretty remarkable. It lined up well where the Chiefs admittedly could use some depth at wide receiver, and this maybe is the greatest wide receiver class in the last 10 years at least. There are players that will be available at receiver at 32 or maybe even in the second round that probably would be top 20 picks in years past. And Xavier Worthy is one I think about. Xavier Worthy ran the fastest 40 time in the history of the combine. He might not be taken in the first round. In years past, he'd probably be a top 15 pick. He'd probably be the 3rd best wide receiver on the board. This year, I don't know. I don't know where Xavier Worthy is going to go. And it goes to show that there is a lot of talent at wide receiver this year, a lot of different directions the Chiefs can go if they want to go wide receiver. They can try to take one at 32. Or like Brett mentioned, there's good depth there in the 2nd and 3rd round as well. They could even take multiple wide receivers for all we know. So a lot of depth at wide receiver this year. That's very exciting if you're a Chiefs fan.
If you haven't seen the episode where you were able to talk with the scouts at the Combine, it's almost like a prerequisite of looking at this episode. So you might pause and go back and find it, because this is where the discussion at wide receiver at 32 really comes into play. Here's why. Let's talk about a checklist that wide receiver, if they're going to be a day one starter on that Thursday night where we open the entire NFL schedule, we have seen this now with 11 years with Andy Reid, especially the guys that he knows he's got to get up and ready to go. You will celebrate your draft selection on that night, maybe for a couple nights. But the next week, your life changes because you're getting Calc 1, 2, and 3. There is so much. We saw this last year with Rashee Rice. So much is put on your plate right away. Coach wants to have it there. He wants to see how you can process it. Plus, remember, Rashee, I don't think he had a virus last year during rookie minicamp because he was just running. It was like, oh, my gosh, where am I at? Okay. The other thing is, we've talked about this before, who has the acumen and understanding to learn all of the receiver positions? Coach will ask you to learn 3 languages all at once, meaning you're going to learn German, English, and Spanish all in one fell swoop. You need to play the slot. You need to play the X receiver on the line of scrimmage. You need to play the Z flanker position a yard off the line of scrimmage. Who's the slot guy, motion guy? Can you understand and read a defense? Many of these are choice routes. Can you play with Patrick Mahomes? All of this we saw come into focus for Rashee Rice last year, really hit kind of after Germany is when it hit. But whomever, if it is a receiver is picked at 32, in your selection and your evaluation, those boxes have to be checked off. And what excites me is I see those guys potentially in this draft.
It's exciting, and you have to have the physical traits, like the size and the speed and the catch radius and all that, but you also have to be able to process information very quickly and accept a whole bunch of different jobs in the offense. And Coach Reid does not make it easy. That's why it's not easy to play receiver in Kansas City. But there are a lot of players, once again, in this year's draft. Could be on day 1, could be on day 2 at the receiver position. We'll talk about some here in a little bit who could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, the second part of Brett's discussion is, and we've seen him do this, if he wants to move down, he'll move down. Chris Jones comes to mind. That's, prior to him. But the point is the Chiefs have been able to move down. Move up, see what they get, move up. Trent McDuffie comes to mind, his exhibits here. The reality here is who's going to be a draft partner.
Yeah.
This is a very real thing. People are going to joke about it maybe with your buddies, but it's a very real thing in the fact that I've said this, your list of teams you can trade with are probably reduced to a really secure general manager in the NFC who's willing to trade with you. San Francisco and Philadelphia don't like us much, okay? And John Lynch and Howie Roseman may say, not so much. AFC teams, because there's an immediate PR hit. If you're that GM, you can't wait 3 years to see if it pans out. Immediately go, why are you helping those guys? Are you trying to get them a three-peat, which has never happened?
It's like when the Ravens traded Orlando Brown Jr. to us, and I think there were people around the league like, what are you doing? Why would you help them? And I think that's really come to fruition now. Brett has even talked about it, where there's like a premium to be paid. Like if the Bengals are going to trade with us, okay, they're going to make us pay a little bit more than if the Cardinals were trading with them. And I get it. I mean, that's fair. From pick 22 to 27, those are all NFC teams. If the Chiefs want to trade up, that could maybe be the zone. And like you said,
and that's manageable from an equity standpoint.
Yeah.
Don't be unrealistic here. Go up to 15 and grab. You have to give up so much equity. And remember, we just laid out that you need it all counts. You need a good draft class here, not just one pick.
I was on the radio earlier today, and they asked if I would trade up to like 7 overall to get Brock Bowers. And on one end, of course I'd love to have Brock Bowers in the Chiefs, 100%. But on the other, that equity can be spread out among so many other players where if you trade up to 7 overall, you're not getting Brian Cook. You're not getting Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson, all those pieces that come together to make a champion. So with all that in mind, of course, trading up is the most exciting thing to do on draft night. Brett was asked about that very topic. What's the likelihood he's going to trade up on Thursday night, and what will it take?
Yeah, it's just kind of, weighing the options. And on one end, there's probably, I think there's 16, 18 guys this year that we have as first round grades. You factor in some quarterbacks there. So, and then some maybe some teams that go in different directions that are contradictory to what our board has. So you figure 16 to 18 names, 4 quarterbacks, maybe 5 quarterbacks. I mean, there could be a window there where we have an opportunity to get a guy, and then it's just weighing, the cost, because If it is a corner or an O lineman or receiver, we're probably going to give up the opportunity to draft that other position later in the draft. So is one guy that you have a first round grade on better than two guys that you maybe have second, third round grades on? It's just kind of weighing that formula for us. And I think that's where it comes down to just the value of that guy that falls. And if he's one of those guys that you really have as a top 10, top 12 pick, I think you up and do it, like Trent McDuffie's situation. I think if it's one of those guys, I think we'll certainly be aggressive, and hopefully we can find a trading partner. But I also think there's some depth in round 2 there. So, I do think there's opportunities to add players that can come in and push for starting positions in rounds 2 and 3 as well.
All right, well, there you have it. Brett answered earlier in the press conference about how, of course, he would love to trade up high in the draft. Of course, there's these players he would love to acquire, but you have to weigh different things. You have to first have a player that's worthy of trading up for, and that player has to probably be sliding, right? So you have to kind of react in the moment. The board comes to you like, here's a player that we thought would be taken earlier. Trent McDuffie is a great example of that because Trent was still there at pick number 21 overall. The Chiefs trade up from 29 to 21. They get Trent. Worked out really well. So you have to have that component, but also the trading partner. And that's the difficult part nowadays. There was reports out there last year the Chiefs attempted to trade up in the first round. Nobody wanted to trade with us, and I get it. Why would you want to help the eventual 2-time back-to-back Super Bowl champion? So it takes 2 to tango. We'll see if the Chiefs trade up at all on Thursday. I think if they stay where they are, they're still going to get a very good player, but we'll see how the board falls.
How many times do you or Ellie get a call and you're like, ooh, no?
Frequently. I get tons of robocalls.
Yeah. Robocalls every night. Or somebody you're like, I don't want to talk to them right now.
It's like marked as spam,
So imagine the other 31 teams
We're marked as spam.
Veach. It's Veach. Spam. Veach is spam. It's Veach. Is that AI? I don't know. Don't take it. Don't take it. It's Veach. It's Veach. Don't answer the call. So we'll just see how this dynamic can work out. It's an interesting point that there are potential trade putters at 22 to 27 because maybe he'll see it and move up. And keep in mind the dynamic of the draft. When Trent McDuffie became available at 21, there were runs and pushes. That could happen in this very draft as well. Everybody anticipates, probably will happen, a big push early at quarterback. Everybody's looking for the next Patrick Mahomes. Then there will be a push for those top wide receivers I mentioned earlier, 3 or 4 or 5. And then, even before that, there could be the 3 or 5 or more offensive tackles who would be day one starters and potential Pro Bowlers. So you're going to have runs here. And we'll get to position groups here in a second, but that run could precipitate it's Veach on the phone.
And we can do as many mock drafts as we want. The board will never fall the way that we expect it to. No. And the Chiefs acknowledge that there's going to be surprises. And maybe, I don't know, like 8 or 9 tackles go in the first round. Well, we didn't see that coming, but that means that maybe a couple receivers that we thought would be gone are there. And or vice versa. Let's say 9 receivers go. That would be an NFL record for the first round. But that means maybe one of those premium tackles is now there in the mid-20s, so you trade up, or maybe they even fall to 32. That's the fun of the draft. You see how it unfolds because every team has their own board. Every team predicts how things are going to go, but no one knows what's really going to happen. That's why no one can predict this with 100% accuracy. And the Chiefs are in a great position where I don't think they have a spot on the roster where it's like, we have to do this in round 1. I think the Chiefs have the benefit right now. They can let the board fall to them. Let's see what happens. They're going to get a really good player at 32 overall. And if there's a guy that slides that they really are in love with, maybe you move up into the mid-20s for him. But it's a great spot to be, the back-to-back defending champion, with an opportunity to get better, but not a situation where you have to fill a need right now.
And keep that thought. We'll get to that after this comment from Brett Veach, which deals with, we have done such a good job of building this roster. And many times it's done even with someone who's not been drafted. Echo Boydo shows up for a tryout and makes the team and downs the punt at the 1 against New England. And we went through all that a couple of episodes ago. But building the board, and I think we take great pride in that for the Chiefs. And let's give credit, too, to the Ravens. The Ravens seem to have done this for years. But when you build the board, it's also having the magic of, now the draft's over, but who can we find to either, 1, right away make the squad, Jack Cochran comes to mind, or 2, a developmental player who you put in the crock pot and they become a player a year or two into your system.
And Nick Jacobs from 41 asked Brett directly, how many players are on your board? And when you first think about the draft board, you may think, well, it's just because those are players that they might draft. But it goes hand in hand with what you're talking about. As Brett's about to mention, he'll use this expansive draft board that'll then turn into a free agency board as soon as the draft ends.
I wrote that down. I knew someone was going to ask me that because I never know. I just see a bunch of names up there.
Right.
I don't like count them. I sort of just move them around and I have them in like pockets. And but I was walking in here. I said, someone's going to ask me exactly how many guys I have on the board. So it's 221, which is a lot. But you'd have to come in here and be with me one day to see how I process this, because like I have guys in the 6th or 7th round on my board, but I always know that we'll never get to the 6th and 7th round. So the total number of boards, total number of players on the board is 221. But in my mind, there's kind of like a line right there. And those guys in 6 and 7, we keep on the board because that's where I want to work down on free agency. And so I know where I'm going. As soon as the draft's over, the guys that we had on the board at 6 and 7, again, we'll have plenty of numbers. We'll never get to them, but that's my free agency board. And that's kind of how we work through that.
So pretty cool. It seems like an obvious thing to do, but the reality is a lot of front offices around the NFL do not put the effort in on these 7th round to priority free agent range kind of players. They just don't do it. They put a lot of effort in to the first part of the draft, and then it takes people who do not want to do anything else but sit in a room and watch tape. It's hard, but it's really just a human will thing, and the Chiefs have these people. I've asked Brett about it. He's like, we just really, really drill in on these players in the latter half of the draft and the priority free agents. And you mentioned Jack Cochran. Mike Caliendo is another one, a player that has a chance to contribute to this team this year.
And could be the new Nick Allegretti.
He could be, yeah.
He could be that 6th man offensive lineman.
And he's a UDFA out of Western Michigan.
And he's versatile. Exactly.
Tershawn Wharton is one of the great examples of this over the years, a UDFA from Missouri S&T several years ago, and of course has been a major contributor for this team. Tommy Townsend was this team's punter for a handful of years, UDFA. You mentioned Echo Boydo and Jack Cochran, like I said earlier. So the Chiefs have been really good about finding these players. Well, how do they do it? They're on their draft board, ranked in a way where they can see the value and they can go down the list, immediately start calling guys as soon as the draft ends. Here are the guys that we want. Here are the players that we would draft if the draft went 12 rounds. It's really genius. And again, it seems obvious, but a lot of teams don't do that, and the Chiefs do.
And why wouldn't you want to come to be a Chief? And two, this goes back to our previous episode with the agents. With the scouts. Those guys develop relationships early on with these guys. And so many times there's a conduit already built. It's college recruiting. It becomes college recruiting. And then you get the preferred walk-on, if you will, as you alluded to. But you can also give these guys some money, right? There's some money involved in this to recruit them. And so the Chiefs have done an excellent job of it. And quite honestly, it's a goal of having 1, 2, or 3 that make your roster every year, hopefully 2, that become players. I mean, they're helping you win that Thursday night game.
And you sign maybe 15 to 20 UDFAs immediately after the draft, and then you have like 45 guys who you extend tryout opportunities to. And next weekend at rookie minicamp, it's amazing. I mean, it's guys doubling up on numbers. There's just like 50 guys out there. And we have this roster. We don't know 3/4 of them. We learn about them that day. And the vast majority are tryout players. So the Chiefs' first-round pick will be out there, and their second-round pick, and the rest of their drafted players. The UDFAs will be out there, and then all of these tryout guys. And every time, 1 or 2 of the tryout guys, of these 40 players that don't have any commitment from the Chiefs beyond that weekend, end up getting signed. And Echo Boydo was that guy last year. Echo Boydo was invited to Chiefs rookie minicamp, and he showed the Chiefs some things and earned a contract, and then, of course, he played for the Chiefs during the season. It's a remarkable, amazing story, but it goes to show all of the work and effort that went into finding Echo Boydo pays off when Echo Boydo makes a couple of plays on special teams during the season. I mean, it's not all about 50-yard touchdowns and a giant sack on 3rd down. It's about finding every player that can help you win in any situation. And the Chiefs are committed to that by not just nailing the first round, by also finding who are we going to invite to rookie minicamp. And then when we get those players there, which one stood out? That's really impressive to me.
And Echo Boydo, who went back to K-State spring practice, went back as a Super Bowl champion. He's getting bro hugs like, dude, you were on the Super Bowl champion.
It's pretty cool.
All right. Let's have some fun here as we close out this edition of Defending the Kingdom. And, again, it all counts is the way and we've laid it out for you that it's everything during the draft week and even a little bit past that. But let's start with wide receiver. You've been asked about it every day, so have I. Who do you like? Who will be there at 32? Who knows? This is not coming from our scouting staff, all right? That's the first caveat. It's like, oh, well, Mitch and Matt said it. Then you'll get us called into the principal's office. This is not giving out government secrets. The other thing, and here's a warning too, don't fall in love with any one player.
Yeah.
Cannot do it.
I always do it.
It'll break your heart.
I always do it.
Not do it. There are the Brian Cooks of the world.
Yeah, I fell in love with Brian Cook in the pre-draft process.
And I go, we got him. And you go, we got him. No, this goes back to
ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Dating my wife, and she broke my heart like 3 times. Like, oh, I thought this was the one. It's like, hang in there, hang in there. So just don't fall in love with any one player. But let's go with wide receiver. Who do you think's there, or who do you like? Who's your favorite player?
Okay, Mitch and I have not crossed notes beforehand, so we're just going into this. We're going to mention some players. So this is a very obvious one. This is a player that I've liked really the entire draft process. It's Adonai Mitchell from Texas. So Adonai Mitchell, 6'2", 205 pounds, 55 catches for 845 yards, 11 touchdowns last year at Texas. Just one drop in his last 20 games, so he's sure-handed. Good speed, ran a 4.34 40. And this is one of my favorite stats on him. He had an 81% touchdown or first down rate in 2023. So 81% of his catches went for either a first down or a touchdown. That was the best rate of any receiver in this class. And he's interesting, too, because he was at Georgia before going to Texas. So he was a back-to-back national champion at Georgia. He actually caught the go-ahead touchdown in the 2021 national championship game. And then transferred to Texas this past year and was, again, just really productive and really good and playing in the college football playoff again. 14 touchdowns in his last 18 starts. Adonai Mitchell is an awesome player. A lot of weird stuff out there over the last 2 weeks on Adonai Mitchell. This is how the draft works, where there's so much time beforehand that you can have a player that you feel really good about, and then like the Bo Callahan stuff from draft day where it's like, well, no one went to his birthday party. It's weird stuff. It's like, whatever.
Bo Callahan.
Adonai Mitchell is a player who might be there at 32, and I would be thrilled if he was a Chief.
My wife loves draft day. I don't know why, but she does. Okay, you know where I'm going with this one.
Yeah.
And it's Xavier Legette of South Carolina. First of all, he's from a small town in South Carolina, 4,500 people up in northeast South Carolina. So already near and dear to my heart. But this is Deebo Samuel of this draft. You watch video of him. What I like about him is he runs really good routes at all 3 levels. This is a yards after catch guy. This is a guy that 4.39, so it's not like he's precluded from running a 9 route or going past you, but most of his work is done much like Deebo Samuel. So think red zone threat, think jet sweeps. But here's where I really am intrigued by him is the fact that this guy, if you get Xavier Legette, don't fall in love with him, Mitch, don't fall in love with him, don't fall in love with him.
We always do this, though.
He takes pressure off Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
We think you have to get another tight end to take pressure off Travis Kelce. No. You get the right kind of – we saw this last year with Rashee Rice a bit. But you get Xavier Legette, immediate pressure is taken off with Hollywood Brown and with Xavier Legette of taking pressure off Travis Kelce. Now, I'm disappointed in you because I thought I knew the guy you would pick.
Okay. Who do you think I was going to take?
Jamari Thrash of Louisville.
Okay.
You know why?
Why?
He was at Georgia State prior to being at Louisville, and that was your fictitious team. You won a national championship playing the college football 14 game, and you won the national title with Georgia State. And I thought you had somewhere Jamari Thrash was on your fictitious team.
We haven't had a good NCAA 14 reference in a while. Mitch and I, if you've been watching the show long enough, you know that what I'm about to say. Mitch and I are religious players of NCAA Football 14 on our old Xbox 360s. You know who that is for you? That I always see him and I think of
He played
you?
against us.
Well, I think of River Craycraft.
Yeah. He was in the minus 28 windshield game.
Yeah, he was. Because Mitch had a dynasty with Washington State, right?
Yeah, we won the Pac-12.
Yeah, and Mitch will even have like all the players' names like imported and everything. And River Craycraft was your guy. So whenever I see him, I think of you and I think of all the national championships he won at Washington State.
He had a 15-yard catch against us in the minus 28 wind chill game. What's the first thing I thought of? Didn't say it on the air, but I thought, that's my guy, man. We got all the way to the Rose Bowl with that guy. Anyway, pretty cool. I'll take the next one. Let's go to corner because let's talk globally here about corner.
Yeah.
That could be the spot because corners, we talked about this run and push and offensive tackles and wide receivers and quarterbacks. Ooh, corners in there. Now, keep in mind, let's go back to our checklist. You need a Spags-type corner.
Yeah.
And it's not just, hey, L'Jarius Sneed was traded to the Titans, need a corner. But there are guys that look like in that comp mode of this group that we can go, the kid from Toledo comes to mind that comes in here. Ennis Rakestraw of Missouri is a guy that will mix it up here. So anyway, corner could be there at 32, and that could be a day one starter at corner.
Yeah, it could be. I would mention Nate Wiggins. Nate Wiggins is a player that I like
Fast.
a lot. Yeah, he ran a 4.28 40. Only Xavier Worthy was faster at the combine. So right on the surface, think about how Steve Spagnuolo likes using his corners. So L'Jarius Sneed began his career in the slot and was just a menace in the slot as a blitzer. He led the NFL from the corner position in pressures for a couple of years. Well, Hegan gets moved outside. Trent McDuffie goes in that spot. Guess who led the NFL in pressures among corners last year? Trent McDuffie. So if you move Trent McDuffie outside, you put Nate Wiggins in the slot. He has 4.28 speed. Can you imagine the havoc he could wreak from that spot? So the speed alone is interesting. He was also productive at Clemson, though, beyond just being a player who's fast. He had 25 passes defensed over his last 23 games. He allowed just a 44% completion percentage when targeted last year, and when he did allow a catch, rarely allowed yards after the catch. He allowed just one catch of 20 or more yards last season, and he was flagged just once for pass interference in 2023. So this is a player that has those physical tools. He has that speed that you can't teach, but also just a lot of production. Now, the only thing with him is he's only 173 pounds, so kind of a slight frame, but otherwise he has stuff you can't teach.
And he's tough. He'll play man-to-man, even though he's slight frame, because looks like there's core strength with him. I want to throw another one in here, because this isn't about, remember, we just lectured you and gave you a sermon on the third day. Let me give you another one, then. This is out of respect for your household. Because they gave Ennis Rakestraw, right?
Yeah.
Tough, hard-nosed, play the slot, make tackles. The other one, this could be in the 7th round, maybe the 6th round, and it's Miles Harden of South Dakota.
Oh, man, go Yotes. Go Yotes.
Your wife's a South Dakota Coyote. You're a Tiger. They played each other this year, and Harden was out there, against Luther Burden, scrapping and fighting away. Miles Harden is from, when you look at Miami Gardens, Florida, but he had I'm going to get this right, forced 11 turnovers in 29 games. 5'11", 195, tough as nails. You could see him showing up in the 6th or 7th round with the Chiefs or some other team. I'm going to go with him. Plus, he went to the same high school as Geno Smith and Johnny Depp.
Wow. Okay.
I'm just saying, man.
Jack Sparrow.
Don't overlook my man Miles Harden from the Yotes of South Dakota.
I imagine a scenario where you and I are in the conference room upstairs. It's like our war room watching the draft, and we take a kid from South Dakota, and I freak out. And I text Ellie, we got a coyote. And she'll be like, okay.
She's binging on some.
Yeah, she'll be like, I turned the draft off hours ago. But I'll be so excited we got a coyote. And she'll be like, don't be weird. Because this happened with Jack Cochran. Because Jack Cochran is a coyote.
Yeah.
And I would tell her, I was like, hey, I told Jack about, how you went to South Dakota and stuff. And she's like, stop embarrassing me. Leave him alone.
My wife will be watching draft day for the 7th consecutive time. What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll give you the last one. We'll close it out this way.
Okay.
Wild card. Take any spot.
Any spot?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
or 2, just real quick, 2, and I'll give you 2.
Yeah, let me think about this. Okay, so.
All right. I'll give you time.
Yeah.
Let me give you, I got a couple.
Okay.
And one of them, you actually featured him. You've done an awesome job here getting everybody set up for the draft.
Well, thanks.
You look Isaiah Davis of South Dakota State.
Yeah. Arch rival
Joplin,
of the Coyotes.
Yeah, he's a Jackrabbit, national champion, FCS. Austin Woodard, who with us in that war room, our own little war room, which is upstairs from the real one. But Isaiah Davis out of Joplin, Missouri, was incredible. 3,400 all-purpose yards, and in 729 touches, 3 fumbles. He had 100-plus yards in 12 of the 16 playoff games. Remember, these guys were playing in the playoffs as much as we were. And so people are backing off 4.6. They don't get, but this is a guy that looks like Pacheco-ish when you look at him in the way he runs, because he runs with his hair on fire. But Joplin, Missouri, shout out, you got one here. The other one I would throw in there is Ben Sinnott of K-State.
Oh, yeah.
I love him, but Waterloo Columbus High School in Iowa. This is a baby Kelsey. He runs the entire route tree. He can run 1 through 9. If you look at what he's done, 4 catches of 40 yards or more. He was only one of 4 FBS tight ends to do that last year and made big catches in the biggest games. Huge in the run to go to the Big 12 championship the year before last. He's just 21 years old. One of the things to look at, too, and this is where the scouting departments look at it, because of COVID, it's been weird in the college ranks, is how old are these guys? Because we got all ranges here, partner. We got them from 21 to 27. And so sometimes, like, it's not Major League Baseball. You're going, ooh, 27 years old, I can't take him. But there is, like, how many years will you have him? Ben Sinnott's just getting started. And when you see him, watch some video of him, you're going to go, ooh, that kind of looks like Kelsey. He also has to block. He's not afraid of blocking, but he can run the entire route tree. So could be a possible tight end, maybe 3rd round, maybe 4th round.
The game against Iowa State in the snow, where he had a huge game, is what I think of when I think of Ben Sinnott. Really, really good player. Yeah. And in particular, he caught a touchdown pass on a tight end screen where he broke like 4 tackles. And all I could think of was, that looks really familiar. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be thrilled with Ben Sinnott. I think that's a great one.
And they run a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
Like their offense is pretty much like ours in a lot of ways, using the tight end and influencing. And so, yeah.
So I'll give you 2 more. We'll go from one local guy to another local guy. How about defensive tackle Darius Robinson from Mizzou? He
perfect Spags.
He's perfect for Spags because he's 285 pounds, but played primarily on the edge last year. But before last season, he was almost exclusively an interior defensive lineman at Mizzou. So think about the versatility that Steve Spagnuolo loves with players like Tershawn Wharton and Mike Dana, even Chris Jones, Charles Omenihu.
And Mike Dana, to me, is the comp for him.
Really similar.
A little bit bigger, but when I watch him, I go, ooh, this looks like Mike Dana.
And Robinson is big. I mean, he's 6'5", 285 pounds, but does kind of play like Dana in a lot of ways. And he had that opportunity to bounce out from defensive tackle to edge rusher last year, and he was just tremendous at it. He had 14 tackles for loss and 8.5 sacks. So Darius Robinson, I can't quite figure out where he's going to go in the draft. You look at some people, they have him going like in the 20s, and then others have him maybe as a 2nd-round pick. But Darius Robinson is a player that I like a lot. Another one that I've been kind of interested in all of draft season is Devontae Walker, wide receiver from North Carolina. Now, he's interesting because I think he kind of gets lost in this loaded receiver class where there are so many good receivers this year that nobody's really talking about Devontae Walker. The reason being because he did not have a great Senior Bowl. He had some drops at the Senior Bowl. But before that, I mean, he's just really impressive and had a good year for North Carolina. He was a Kent State transfer, played 1 year at North Carolina. In that 1 year for the Tar Heels, he had 41 catches for 700 yards and 7 touchdowns, averaged 17 yards per catch. I mentioned earlier that Nate Wiggins allowed only 1 catch of 20 or more yards all season. It was to Devontae Walker. And he runs a 4.36. His average depth of target was 18.2 yards. You hear all those things. What that is a player who can stretch the field. But he's not just a burner who needs to be wide open. He can go up over DBs because he has great length. Many times if you watch his tape, he can make contested catches. So he's probably not a polished, finished product at receiver, and that's why he's not being talked about as a first-round pick. And he had that rough Senior Bowl. But overall, this is a guy who has excellent size and speed, made a lot of big plays last year at North Carolina. And if you're trying to add an explosive element to the Chiefs' passing game from a rookie this year, Devontae Walker could make some sense. So I'm intrigued by him. And he could be available on day 2.
Yeah, no question. I see a kind of a Mike Evans, Mike Williams, and him high pointing at the 3rd level. He is really good at the 3rd level in making big plays. 3rd level, 1st level, 2nd level, day 1, day 2, day 3, undrafted free agents, rookie mini camp. We hopefully have laid this out for you because as we go into these next several days, really the next week, starting with Thursday night in the 1st round, hey, he's Matt McMullen. I'm Mitch Holthus, voice of the Chiefs, and just know it all counts.